First of all, I appreciate the invitation, and I thank UMR for its sensitivity and support. Turkey, as the center of the earthquake, is going through an incredibly difficult time, and the Turkish nation is mourning. Therefore, international support matters a lot to us. Well, before giving details about the devastating earthquakes, I'd like to start my speech with the wonderful words of the late Aliya Izetbegovic. In moments of real tragedy, there is no place for complacent grief. This is what we're doing here today together. And it's also what has been adopted by Turkey in the last few decades, in particular across the world. So as you mentioned, Dr. Samir, upon your suggestion, I'd like to briefly mention Turkey's humanitarian policy before getting into the details of the recent disaster. A culture of philanthropy and humanitarian values have been interwoven into the culture of the Turkish people over the course of centuries since the Ottoman Empire. And at the root of this culture undoubtedly lies the value that Islam places on human life, altruism, and solidarity. And the Turkish philosophy of benevolence and solidarity that encompasses all those in need, regardless of race, religion, and geography, is known to have re-manifested itself in the state's foreign policy in recent decades, and that's what I mostly cover in my book that you just mentioned. In this respect, the Turkish international assistance model has been behaving in line with the basic principles of humanitarianism, which are humanitarian imperative, impartiality, neutrality, and independence. And in just one simple phrase, the Turkish aid policy can be summarized as leaving no one behind. And the United Nations Secretary General Guterres just mentioned this last week while calling for international support to Turkey. He said that Turkey has stood in solidarity with others seeking assistance, and it is home to the largest number of refugees in the world right now, and it has shown enormous generosity to its Syrian neighbors for years. In fact, this active humanitarian policy has made Turkey a world leader in humanitarian assistance. As you can see in this graph, Turkey allocated around 1% of its gross national income to global humanitarian aid efforts in 2021. And this was, as you can see in the graph, this was far beyond any other country's performance in the world. And if you check data from earlier years within the last decade, you can see similar outlooks and rankings in terms of both the aid amount and its share in national income. And here you can see an important evidence of Turkey's humanitarianism, the Syrians hosted by Turkey. While, as you know, while many high-income countries in Europe hesitated or refused to embrace the desperate Syrians during the war, Turkey implemented an open door policy and provided temporary protection status to the Syrians. And as a result of this open door policy, Turkey has harbored 3.7 million Syrians. And some of these Syrians have been living in the earthquake region. Unfortunately, around 10% of the population affected by the earthquake in Turkey is composed of Syrians. So having briefly provided a background on Turkey's recent humanitarian history, now I'd like to, of course, there is more to talk about this, but we have limited time and we have a focus on the earthquake. So I'd like to talk about the disaster that has severely shaken southern Turkey and northern Syria. And I'd like to note that the information that I will provide in this presentation will basically cover Türkiye with recent numbers. So on February 6th, as you know, the city of Kahramanmaraş was struck by two major and distinct earthquakes, which occurred within only 9 hours. First in Pazarcık and then in Elbistan. And these two districts are 100 miles away from each other, and the magnitudes of both earthquakes were huge. The one in Pazarcık had a magnitude of 7.8, and the one in Elbistan had a magnitude of 7.6. And although the center of the earthquake was the city of Kahramanmaraş, the extreme magnitude has affected a large area, very large area, covering 11 cities in the country, in addition to the northwestern Syria. So the affected region within the borders of Turkey only corresponds to an area of 45,000 square miles, a very sizable area, which is larger than many countries, including Jordan, Austria, United Arab Emirates, and Hungary. And records also show that the region has been shaken by over 6,200 aftershocks so far, and this number is changing every single day. And unfortunately, as Dr. Samir just mentioned, the province of Hatay had a brand new earthquake today in the magnitude of 6.4. It was even felt in Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, and Israel. So the disaster is continuing. And this big region has obviously a very large population. We're talking about 14 million people, 10% of which are Syrians under temporary protection, as I mentioned before. And here is the main picture for the toll. So far, 41,000 people, over 41,000 people have lost their lives, and over 108,000 people have been injured in the earthquakes. It also seems that, based on the recent figures, the number of the collapsed and the severely damaged buildings is quite high, more than 105,000 buildings, consisting of more than 400,000 separate units and apartments are collapsed or severely damaged. And I should note here that snow and freezing winter conditions have made the impact of the earthquakes even worse for the victims. And these conditions also impeded the search and rescue operations, unfortunately. So this terrible outlook, which covers a very large area, in this terrible outlook, the emergency response to the disaster has mainly focused on, obviously, rescuing survivors who were trapped under the rubbles. The Turkish government has responded to the disaster with thousands of employees on the ground. As you can imagine, the other priorities of the teams in the region have been providing food, shelter, and health services to people who have been affected by the disaster. And these activities have been organized under the coordination of AFAD, Turkey's Disaster and Emergency Management Authority. All the ministries and their related units, all the many municipalities and their related units across the country, as well as police and gendarmerie and soldiers, have actively taken place in these efforts. I should also mention that a huge support has been provided by the Turkish NGOs and volunteers on the ground. In total, the number of people working for the victims in the region has been nearly 275,000 so far. And Turkey has also received international support during these search and rescue operations. The peak number for the search and rescue specialists on the ground has been, during the first 2 weeks, has been over 35,500 in total, and over 11,000 of this number have operated under international foreign rescue teams. So the Turkish government and the Turkish nation appreciate this support, which helps save many lives during the first days of the earthquakes. And of course, many countries, people from various countries provided humanitarian aid during these extremely difficult days, and they continue to do so. Well, this disaster, which is called the disaster of the century for Turkey, obviously will not be easy to recover from. The death toll is just heartbreaking, and no words can describe our pain right now. On the other hand, for the people of the region, the life will literally need to start over. Most families do not have houses.
If you can, unmute yourself, please. Who's talking, please? Go ahead, please. Thank you.
Okay, is there a problem with the presentation?
No, someone just opened his microphone. Go ahead.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so on the other hand, for the people of the region, as I said, the life will need to start over. Most families, they do not have houses, and they do not know what to do. Some of them are transferred to other regions and cities in the country. The government institutions and the NGOs, they do and will help them in this process, but this also requires an international solidarity, as the post-quake disaster destruction in the region is catastrophic. And in this sense, we can focus on the short run and the long run roadmaps separately. So for the short run, we'll have the work for relief and rehabilitation. This disaster leaves hundreds of thousands of people vulnerable amid harsh winter conditions, and in this sense, supporting humanitarian needs and health services will be of significance for a while. This will be coordinated by AFAD, the Disaster and Emergency Management Authority, and the Turkish Red Crescent with the support of NGOs. And here, the international support will significantly matter. Right now, the urgent needs are tents, heaters, sleeping bags, portable toilets, generators, and container homes and blankets. Currently, the Turkish government is also working on the evacuation of the victims to other cities. There are public facilities, hotels, and university dorms across the country that have been assigned to the use of the earthquake victims. And of course, in this process, psychological support to the victims, especially the child victims, will hugely matter. And once these affected areas have been evacuated, debris removal will intensify to prepare the cities for the reconstruction as soon as possible. And for the medium and long run, the issue will be reconstruction, obviously. Of course, the post-earthquake work will be a very long and challenging journey, which will take months and even years. For the reconstruction and in the earthquake zone, all Turkish ministries will be in charge, and I can say that Turkey has suffered many earthquakes before, albeit in single cities mostly. And based on this previous experience, I can say that the government would accelerate its efforts to reconstruct the cities in the following months in terms of infrastructure, facilities, and housing. And in this respect, TOKİ, the Turkish Housing Development Organization, will be the leading actor to undertake the construction activities in the disaster zone. And support from the international community in the medium and long run will also matter, because we need to think about the longer term, not only the immediate needs for relief. So the international community, and particularly our Muslim brothers and sisters, can transfer both monetary and in-kind donations to the earthquake zone. In this respect, I would like to thank UMR for the donation campaign that they organized for Turkey and Syria. And the Turkish embassy in Washington, D.C. and the consulates across the United States will also continue to accept humanitarian aid in both forms. Here you can see some basic information provided through the official announcements of the Turkish diplomatic missions in the United States. You can find the addresses of the consulates also on the social media in case you and your communities decide to provide in-kind aid. The embassy and the consulates send in-kind donations brought to them to Türkiye through Turkish Airlines in a very speedy and prioritized manner. And this concludes my presentation. I'd like to extend my gratitude to UMR for organizing this meaningful event, and I sincerely appreciate your participation and interest. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Hatice, for this presentation and overview of the Turkish affecting and what's needed. And to be honest with all of the audience, that we just thought about the name of the webinar and concentrating in Turkey, and we just found while we thinking about the topic that the disaster is very huge and the impact are big, and it's a huge sad earthquake and never happened before. So we decided that we haven't Khadija with us, so we said let's just concentrate on Turkey so we can have some deep information, and especially we have some information as you saw and statistics about the international rescues, about the numbers. Turkey's situation sometimes regarding information is much better than northern Syria, even that Syria has got affected badly, and there is also a bad experience on cooperation with the, I don't want to say only just the United Nations, but all of the international humanitarian assistance. We didn't find that Syria took care of as supposed to be, and this is have a different responsibilities and different reasons. I move now to Dr. Abed. He might fill a little bit of the gap of what we're talking about, and he can mention Syrian response or UMR as an example response about this crisis. Abed Ayoub is the CEO of United Mission for Relief, headquartered in Washington, and have offices in different parts of the world. And they have, as Khadija said, they have this campaign, they ran it in the United States, and he will talk about general challenges, experience on this kind of a crisis, and what did they do, and what advices he can give us, and any comments, especially he might concentrate in Syria. Thank you. Go ahead, Dr. Abed, the floor is yours.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you so much, Dr. Khadija, for your presentation. And thank you, Brother Samir, for organizing this webinar. Definitely, Syria was forgotten in this. The devastation in Turkey was by far larger, and most of the entities definitely easier for them to deal with the Turkish government. And of course, Turkey is equipped. People can fly to it easily. They can. They have a system that make the humanitarian work, humanitarian assistance, is by far easier from logistic perspective, and the cooperation of the government. I met the Turkish ambassador like 2 days after the earthquake with a Zoom meeting, and he's simply extended his hand for aid if we need any help. As an NGO, the Turkish government is willing to come and help. The problem in Syria, it's so much politics. There is so many different entities that try to benefit from the crisis. That's very unfortunate. And we deal with so many different entities. We have the Syrian government. We have the groups, the opposition on the north. And we also have some organization is being designated by the United States as terrorist organization. That makes it extremely difficult for NGOs to navigate between all of that and stay in compliance. Syria definitely got hit hard too, but they could not find heavy equipment that they can remove all these rubbles that, as a result of the collapsed building and so on. Many roads being destroyed. Even entry points that can bring aid to Turkey, to Syria, also was closed for many reasons. Some of them has been damaged by the earthquake, and some of them because of the political situation and the so many international entities have lots of influence inside Syria, but that's delayed the international aid to Syria. But alhamdulillah, in the United States, many entities jumped to help, from the government to international NGOs, even mosques. Everybody start organizing fundraising campaigns, and they collected funds. And I remember a press release came from USCMO like 3 days after the earthquake. They said around $100 million being collected immediately to the victims of the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. But we have to understand that the need is huge in both countries, and it doesn't matter how much NGOs can collect, it's not enough, because it's for Syria in particular, they still a civil war. They have so many calamities. They are suffering way before the earthquake, and the earthquake added to the suffering of the Syrian people. So that's make it worse. And we have so many refugees, internal refugees inside the country, and the earthquake added to it. So now people used to have some kind of houses that they live in, and all of a sudden they find themselves homeless, basically. And they start running to seek shelter in camps. So now we deal with so many mental health problems. It's not easy. A lot of people lost their loved ones. Even the humanitarian workers got killed as a result of the earthquake. But the NGOs are dealing with so many different fronts. To me, the biggest challenge is very much the compliance. So how to stay in compliance, working inside Syria while you are providing the help. At this time, we really need to put the politics at the side. There's so many people need help. And if we stay focusing on politics, we're gonna lose a lot of lives. This time is the time of saving lives. Humanitarian workers need a lot of support. It's not only financial. We need the policymakers to work with us to make it easier, to make it safe for the humanitarian workers to go and help. Plus, definitely, the fund, as Brother Shariq always say, if we get cash, the cash, we can use this cash to purchase from the local market, that we can move the local economy, help the local businesses, and at the same time, the aid can be by more fast to get to the needy people. Inshallah, we're going to stop here, and we are open for the questions later. Jazakumullah khair.
Thank you, Abed, for this quick brief and highlighting some sides of the tragic situation in Syria. And as we say that because there is not like a country that we cannot judge what's happened in Syria, but we definitely saw that there is a mixed in priorities and mix between humanitarian issues and political issues. For example, when you look back at the debate on opening the borders, even that there are United Nations rules or regulations not to open the border, but this is something unexpected. If we don't rescue the people underneath the buildings and the rocks, in 3-4 days they will be died. So I believe that we failed in responding to this unusual crisis in Syria. Regarding Syria, we stuck with, they say, oh, there is an international humanitarian law that we should respect, and did not just bear in mind that people are dying every minute and every hour is worth a life to save. So thank you, Dr. Abed. Now I move to Shariq. Dr. Shariq is a professor, assistant professor in Indiana University, and he works with all of these aspects in charitable giving, in philanthropy work, and he will speak about how a crisis affect different sides of humanitarian work. He will give us some information, some research, some statistics, because even that a crisis is something bad, but sometimes it has unique issue regarding what it tells us about and what is the difference in this, okay, this specifically in this disaster comparing to other crises and how we dealt with it regarding the humanitarian side. Go ahead, please, Dr. Shah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khairan. Thank you so much, first of all, for UMR for organizing this, and in particular, Dr. Samir Abu Rumman from Princeton for putting this all together. I also want to thank Dr. Hatice and Dr. Abed for their presentations. And before I start, I wanted to particularly, sort of lend my prayers and thoughts from brothers and sisters in Turkey and Syria that are impacted. Many are my students that I were there, and my current students that are actually in Gaziantep and so on, that have, are homeless and displaced. So want to make sure that I give my salam, my dua, and my prayers to those brothers and sisters that are suffering in Syria and Turkey right now. When we think about crisis is always seen as a motivator of giving. So we think, and we see this, for example, right now, one of the major challenges we're facing within philanthropy or giving is the fact that you have many crowdfunding campaigns, right? People are it's easy to raise money. But the question is, which of these crowdfunding campaigns are legitimate? Which ones are not? We don't know this. And so that's why even you're hearing from the Turkish government, you're hearing from the United Nations, you're hearing from many multilateral organizations. So to please go with organizations that have an infrastructure. Not every organization that does the work even has the infrastructure in Turkey, right? So UMR, many organizations actually have infrastructure. So the first thing is to so philanthropy and giving, this becomes an opportunity. So this question of fraud, while is an inhibiting factor, at the same time, sometimes even people that want to give, because of the few bad actors, they say, I don't trust the people out there, I don't want to necessarily give. So the one piece of it is that the advice is to go through formal channels, because formal channels are more likely to be vetted, more likely to get the funds through, and more likely to support. The other piece of it is that at this time, the immediate reaction, and I see this in the mosques and I see this in other places, people want to just donate clothes. They want to donate food. But the reality is that is unlikely to have an important impact right away, because how are we going to get this stuff there? And so most scholars say that cash is king during crisis. In crisis, we're better off to get the money directly there. There's the local economy, there's local support. And actually most things, if you donate a sweater here, it's cheaper for us to buy it in those regions than for us to put it on a container and ship it there. So that cash is king, as Dr. Abed mentioned. I think the third piece of it is, and Dr. Abed mentioned this, is the compliance issue, right? Compliance remains a major factor, which sometimes turns off giving. People are so scared, so afraid that even though at a time like this, where really regulations and all these compliance issues should be secondary, people are so afraid to doing this that this is also an inhibiting factor in philanthropy. The next one I'll share is perception. So for example, if you were to think about the earthquake in Haiti and the earthquake in Japan, the Japan earthquake, even though Japan is a richer country, has a richer diaspora, only raised what, $50 million, right, roughly. Whereas the Haiti earthquake raised close to 300 million. And one of the reasons my colleague, Dr. Patrick Rooney, he's an economist at the Lilly School, argues is that perception of need. So even if you think about Ukraine versus Syria, right? So that's another example. In both cases, the need was apparent in both places, but affinity mattered. You know, so some people felt in the West more affinity to, say, Ukraine than they did to the Syrian refugees. And so the same crisis that we think about here in Turkey is that right now it's apparent what the need is. The question is, how can we create communities of participation and affinity so that people, regardless of their faith, regardless of their nationality, regardless of their race, ethnicity, and so on, are willing to create the humanitarian support. And then the last piece that I would share is that, second last piece is that one of the challenges, and Dr. Naim Kachipu at University of Central Florida has a number of research about this, you know, everybody right now is pushing and rushing to raise money. We have an anonymous donor that gave $30 million through the Turkish embassy in the US. We had the founder of Chobani just gave $2 to $3 million, right? But the earthquake is now, and we're having aftershocks, but months after these aftershocks stop, the reverberation of the humanitarian crisis continue. But the problem is that the philanthropy is immediate, episodic, and right now. So how can we make sure that we create a culture that continues to support the humanitarian crisis long after the earthquake and the aftershock stop sort of becoming apparent? Because the reconstruction is going to take a long time, and that's very important. And then the final piece that I'll share is American Muslims, for example, give around $4.3 billion of charity, of which 15% goes overseas, right? Which is a significant amount. It's not a majority, but it's a very small amount of the total giving about American Muslims, but it's still an important amount of money that's going overseas. Now, the question that people have been asking is, this crisis is occurring a month before Ramadan. So how is this going to impact the broader financial crisis within, because in Ramadan, you're raising not just for this earthquake, you're raising for Palestine, you're raising for Syria, you're raising for Pakistan, and so on. And prior research, and COVID is an example, COVID pandemic occurred a month before the crisis, before Ramadan. And what we found is that people in the United States, especially Muslim Americans, dug deeper. Like if they were going to give $100 to Ramadan, they gave $150 because they felt that this crisis was a bigger, and it was an existential kind of an additional threat. So one of the things that I would encourage many of us, whether you're students, whether you're advocates, whether you're nonprofit organizations, is to remind people that this is an extraordinary crisis that requires an extraordinary kind of impact. But the rest of the world and the rest of the challenges that we are facing still need our support. So this is a time where all of us need to dig deep and go further and give more, because this is an extraordinary crisis. And so I want to thank, so I'll stop here, and I'm sure we'll have question and answers, but I did want to thank everybody for their remarks, and happy to add.
And Dr. Shariq, Dr. Samir, if you allow me just 1 minute.
Go ahead, we have time.
Okay, I just want to send also a warning to the in-kind donation. We don't want to use Turkey or Syria to be a dump for corporations or for those who wants to get rid of things. So we need to, if we're going to send in-kind donation, definitely we encourage cash. But if we need to send in-kind donation, we have to be extremely careful. Send the things that the country needs, send the things that the beneficiary truly can use. But we understand that sometimes from the previous experience that corporations start sending stuff that near expiration or expired. So a country like Syria, they are not equipped to deal with something like that. Sending used clothes can bring diseases and so on. But we have to be extremely, extremely careful what to send to these countries.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Abed. I really agree. And even from the presentation, Dr. Khadija mentioned one of the statements from the Turkish embassy. They're asking to stop in-kind donation and just limited it with some certain items. And this goes all to what you're saying. And sometimes you need some advice and some organization to see which is better and which is faster and which is more effective in such a crisis. I agree also with Shariq when he says that crisis is, even if it's a bad situation, but it's sometimes motivating donations and others. And I really hope that what you said, that there is a positive impact on donations and the amount of donations on Ramadan, because some people say when people give before that, they might affect it negatively and not give in Ramadan. So this is another point of view that no, they say, let's give so we can have mercy and other issues. So thank you all for this, for sharing these ideas. And I open it to if we have any questions, any comments, any more, even from the presenters, any more clarifications. If there is something in the chat, or if any one of the audience would like to speak, just open the mic, because or raise your hand, wherever you find it suitable for you. Until we have something, I was wondering, Abed, from your experience, what do you think the most challenge facing getting money in these, as a humanitarian leader, getting more donations, more awareness for the donors in the United States, especially? Any disadvantages, advantages, challenges you think in this experience, especially?
Yeah, I mean, again, sometimes banks are actually do flag certain countries when you want to do wire transfer. And it depends on the political situation. It depends on their relation with the US and so on. And the lists keep changing. You know, it's not a set list, but it's almost daily change. So sometimes, for example, Turkey was flagged. So if you want to go and transfer fund to Turkey, banks can come and send you a million questions. You have really to explain. Syria definitely also a country flagged. But the situation in Syria is almost always flagged. But for Turkey, it depends on the political situation. Sometimes flagged, sometimes not. So we advise the donors to donate their money inside the United States and have the organization that they choose deal with it. So they are equipped. They have compliance department. They have lawyers and so on that they can deal with it. But if individually start sending money on their own, that might put them at risk. So we don't advise them to send money outside of the country. So have their donation inside the United States.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, if we have any questions, we can take it until we read some. There's a good question in the chat. It's from Sarah. She's wondering if there is any medical or non-medical volunteering opportunities abroad. We know that UMR had different medical campaigns in Kenya and different parts of the world. What about this disaster or this event. Yeah.
Yes, actually, we have our medical partner, Islamic Medical Association of North America. They already sent a team. They are working with UMR. We do it jointly together, and they are in coordination with some medical groups inside Turkey. And definitely, if somebody wants to volunteer their time and to be part of this kind of mission, if needed, because Turkey in particular, they have a qualified medical doctors and so on, and there are so many. But if there is a need, we will do. Right now, we're supporting Turkey with medicine and medical supplies. But medical doctor, they did not ask for additional medical doctors to go there. For Syria, Syria is different, and I think there is a need for Syria. If somebody wants to donate their time as medical doctor, we can make some arrangement, connect them with our partners, medical groups partner, that they can help in Syria, inshallah.
Thank you, thank you. I just also want to ask in the same topic, Dr. Khadija. We saw in the news in the first days that a lot of volunteering got crowded in Istanbul airports, and they wanted to fly and to volunteer. And other people, even from the United States and different parts of the world, they wanted to go. But there were some advices that we cannot organize housing them, where would they stay, how we transfer them, or about the airline. So from your what you read and how was the volunteering experience, especially in the first days where we need to focus on our priorities? We need rescues, we need professional people, not just people taking the rocks in their ways or their hands. Yeah. If you unmute yourself.
Yes, you're right. So for the first few days, we had that chaos, unfortunately. Of course, everybody had good intentions to help the victims in the earthquake zone, but there were some difficulties regarding the earthquake zone because the earthquake damaged the roads and some airports, etc. That's what there was, this accumulation in some airports. And also the government and the related institutions wanted to prioritize those who could be professionally helpful in the region. And that's why the coordination requested by the government under the authority of the disaster and emergency management, AFAD, as I mentioned in my presentation, was critical, because AFAD organizes all those, supporting activities, health or sheltering or food, and also the Red Crescent, helps in that sense, supports AFAD in that sense. So what the government wanted to achieve in the first few days was a successful coordination under AFAD to prevent those, problems that you saw in some news.
Yeah, thank you.
Right now, we have everything organized. After the first 2 days, everything have been organized, and some damages have been repaired. So all the zones became reachable after just a few days for everyone.
Thank you, thank you. And I hope that we can come up with like some data sets of information, how many countries send rescue teams, what were the equipment at these days, because I see some rescue teams coming back from Turkey to Europe, to the Gulf region. So we just don't know the numbers. And sometimes we really, in these kind of situations and crisis, you need some leaders to tell you what to do the best and what's the priorities. For example, and also sometimes the United Nations rule, it can go and say in the press release, this country please send, or we ask countries to send rescue teams and equipment to rescue people more than, like for instance, food, which can be bought from Istanbul, but rescue team cannot come from Istanbul. So these gearing and balancing what's to do and when, I believe that we really need to understand from this crisis what happened, what mistakes we did, how we can prevent in other similar crises to deal with it right in advance. Yeah. If you want to add something, Shariq, Dr. Shariq, or anyone.
One question I had was to both Dr. Abed and Dr. Khadija. One of the things that we're hearing about is that, there are all these different organizations, right? So you have in Turkey, you have Kizilay and others and so on, and then of course we have infrastructure. So what is the coordination like between American Muslim nonprofit organizations and organizations like UMR and these institutions that are on the front lines? What's that coordination like? How are they working together? Are they doing complementary? Is that working well? Just because that would be, I think that's an important question in the minds of donors in trying to get the money out. Because for us, as an American Muslim or as an American, it's easy for us to give to an institution like UMR and so on, because they're local, right? And then, because that's the ease, the local tax deduction, there's trust, there's legitimacy. But how are these organizations working with the organizations overseas? So I'd love to hear from both of you about that, because it's a question that's come up to me from a number of people.
Yeah, I can speak from our experience and what exactly we did in this crisis. For example, we immediately identified an organization who was in the ground, and definitely we go through a vetting process, make sure that organization that we deal with is truly on the ground, and also have a clean file. They are not flagged in any list, and they are legit. They have, bank account that we in a certain country that we can deal with them easily, transfer fund and so on. I'm talking about Syria in particular, because it's a very complex situation to work in Syria. And in the ground, they have something called a cluster meetings. When the organizations get together, identify needs and coordinate. And the organization who are part of that, they usually report their future projects, what they are trying to do and what they're actually doing right now. So they agree to, among themselves on the area that they need to focus on. They agree on the need and so on. But the coordination is very close. So, and from the organizations who are in the ground, they report back to us. They will tell us, hey, this particular area, I need this 1, 2, 3, 4. And based on that, we design our fundraising campaign and we start raising funds for these particular needs. So.
Yes, there are some very strong Turkish NGOs like İHA, as you know. They have been coordinated across Turkey and also Syria for this crisis and the crisis we had before. But the main thing that the Turkish government announces continuously is that it encourages all organizations to work with official organizations like AFAD, because in that case we can, allocate the aid coming to Turkey based on the needs across cities. So the government wants to centralize this under AFAD and also the Red Crescent, Turkish Red Crescent, Kızılay. But coordination with those strong NGOs on the ground is another way, and another reliable way.
Go ahead, Hamid. We have 6 minutes almost, yeah.
Thank you very much. I just have a question. It's about how to loop the Islamic funding efforts into the international efforts. Because when we look at the cluster coordination system and the coordination system, it's easy to realize the size and the impact of international efforts, but the Islamic background organization efforts, it's kind of becoming forgetting and kind of not really shared among international communities. How, I would say, an Islamic background organization can overcome this challenge, and how can be part of the collective international efforts?
Yeah, no, I can say that many Muslim organizations in the United States start getting into the mainstream, and they start coordinating somehow with agencies like United Nations agencies and other international NGOs. They are, some of them are part of the system, and I do encourage other organizations to also to get involved. Muslim organization cannot isolate themselves. The Muslim organization sit in a treasure. They can actually influence policies if they get involved. But if we isolate ourselves, definitely we are very, very small players. So we have to be part of the system, and we have to push hard that the international relief workers raise the bar and they raise the standard. We sometimes have some problems with the way United Nations agencies, for example, present themselves, operation costs and many other stuff. But we have, I think, a big role to play to influence the way they operate and to influence the type of programs that they bring to the Middle East and the Muslim world. And also, we have to also try to influence the operation cost, how much United Nations and other agencies are actually charging to take the aid to the victims and to the needy people. But we have to get involved.
Some people, Dr. Abed, say that in these kind of situations, the best partner will be a governmental local partner or the United Nations agencies because they have more powerful than other partners. What do you think of that? So if you have the choice to work with.
United Nations agencies definitely have access. Sometimes they exempt from certain things that regular NGOs don't have. That's definitely is an advantage. But also United Nations agencies cannot do everything. They cannot reach to every single area. And also, the level of trust, sometimes in a question mark in certain areas, but it's not that simple that to be accepted and so on. Usually the level of trust with the NGOs is a little bit higher, especially if the NGO who are sensitive to the culture, understand the culture, they don't have hidden agenda and so on. Everything is clear. So both needed. As I mentioned before, we need to find ways how we can work with them and how we can influence the policies that they are adopting. So both are needed. So.
Thank you. My last question to Dr. Khadija in 1 minute. You was a witness on this big disaster here for your country, and I know, and we met, and I saw your daughter, and you all got affected of this tragic what happened. So how you feel you satisfied, regardless of this sad event, on the sympathy with Turkey, and also what's the reaction and response regarding formal reaction in Turkish embassy in DC or other parts of their of the consulate there?
Beyond the pain we're suffering, it's really great to see this strong solidarity in the United States, and also the assistance coming from many other nations. I think it's a great time to prove that, to show that humanity is there everywhere, regardless of faith and geography and ethnicity and race. That's what we need at all times, I guess. We should remember this very important nature of humanity at all times, even in the absence of crises. I think that's what I witness and think about right now after seeing all this great support. Thank you. for having me today and talking about this painful disaster and getting support for this.
Thank you, and hope it will be the end of those serious earthquake, especially after the news today, and think people will be safe and recover soon. Even if you mentioned it's a long way of recovery, but at least we will hope that things will be better for all the people there, inshallah.
Inshallah, thank you.
I really thank you all for this webinar, and also I thank a lot of the comments in the chat. They're thanking you also, and we hope that this is even it's a tragic disaster. We just want to learn more and more, and this is part of our role to raise awareness and learn lessons from those kinds of events happening around the world. Thank you, Dr. Khadija, Dr. Shariq, Dr. Abed, for your time, and thanks for everyone who joined us today, and hope to see you more with our webinars, inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.